Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every life, quiet, often unnoticed, when a deeper truth begins to rise to the surface of awareness. This truth is not new. It has always been here, but we have been too busy, too distracted, too identified with the noise of the world to hear it. The truth is this: God is dealing when you find yourself in a place you did not expect, when life no longer makes sense, when everything you depended on begins to fall away. Do not panic. God is dealing. We are often taught, whether consciously or unconsciously, to look for God outside of ourselves, in the skies, in distant heavens, or in the narratives of sacred texts that speak of ages past. We become seekers, yearning for a divine presence that always seems to be somewhere else or sometime else. But what if the presence we seek is not far away? What if it is not hidden in the future or buried in the past? What if the only place where God truly deals with us, ever, is the present moment? This moment right now is not ordinary. It may appear ordinary to the mind, which constantly categorizes, compares, and rushes ahead. But in truth, the now is the most extraordinary place there is, because it is the only place where life actually happens. The past is gone, a collection of memories stored in the mind. The future is a mental projection, an imagined reality that hasn't yet arrived. But the now, this moment, is alive, vibrant, and infinitely spacious. It is the doorway through which the eternal enters time. God is not found in linear time. Divine activity does not unfold according to the timelines of our intellect or the deadlines of our culture. The divine is timeless, and it only reveals itself to those who become present. Why? Because presence is the dissolution of the ego's grip. The ego cannot live in the now. It survives by feeding on past regrets and future anxieties. So when we become truly present, we enter a state of consciousness where God can begin to deal with us, not through fear or punishment, but through awareness. This divine dealing may not come with lightning or dramatic voices from the sky. It often comes more subtly, as a shift in perception, a quiet sense of peace, or a sudden insight into something we had long misunderstood. When we bring our full attention to this moment, to the sensations in our body, the breath flowing in and out, the stillness underneath the noise, we open ourselves to what cannot be seen with the eyes or grasped by the mind. We open ourselves to being. Being is not something we do, it is what we are beneath all doing. And it is in that state of being, which only ever exists now, that the divine meets us. Not as a distant deity, but as the very essence of life itself, as the intelligence behind every heartbeat, as the presence that witnesses your thoughts without being entangled in them. When we understand that God is dealing with us in the present moment, everything changes. We begin to see that the conversation we were waiting for, the sign we were hoping to receive, the healing we were longing for, all of it is available now, not later. Not when we become better or more spiritual or more deserving, but right here, in the quiet space of simple awareness. To live in the present is not to abandon responsibility or ignore the practicalities of life. It is to bring a sacred attentiveness to everything we do, whether we are washing dishes, walking in nature, or sitting in silence. It is to live as if each moment matters, because it does. It is the only moment that ever has. So if you truly want to experience the divine, if you want to know what it means to say God is dealing, stop searching outside. Cease waiting for a better moment. Return to the place where God has always been waiting. Here now, in the stillness that is never absent. Let the now become your sanctuary. Let the present moment become your teacher. Let it be enough. Suffering is one of the most misunderstood experiences in human life. We often view it as something to escape, something to fix, something to resist at all costs. And yet, in many spiritual traditions and inner teachings, suffering is not seen as a mistake or a punishment, but as a necessary threshold, a kind of sacred doorway through which transformation becomes possible. When we say a God is dealing, we must recognize that suffering is often the very tool through which that divine dealing occurs. Pain has a way of revealing what comfort often conceals. In the absence of difficulty, it is easy to remain unconscious, to move through life on autopilot, reacting out of habit, avoiding the deeper questions, and building our identity around things that are temporary. But when suffering enters, it interrupts that flow. It forces a pause. It breaks the illusion of control. And in that breaking, something deeper can emerge. Suffering has an intelligence of its own. While the surface of pain may feel chaotic, underneath it there is often a deeper order, a refinement taking place in silence. When we experience loss, heartbreak, illness, or uncertainty, we are being stripped of what is not essential. The roles we cling to, the plans we made, the self-image we constructed, all of it begins to unravel. Though it may feel like life is falling apart, what is actually happening is that something false is dying and something true is being born. It is through these very moments that God deals with the inner structures we do not even know we are carrying, the hidden fears, the suppressed grief, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are or who we must be. When we are forced into stillness by pain, we begin to see what is really there. The noise of the world fades, and we come face to face with what lies beneath. Sometimes this confrontation is raw and uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. In that space, we begin to see that what we thought was the end is actually a beginning. To be clear, this is not to romanticize suffering or to deny its very real pain. Rather, it is to point out that pain alone is not the end of the story. What determines the outcome of suffering is how we meet it. When we resist it, deny it, or label it as wrong, we stay trapped in it. But when we become present with it, when we allow it to teach us, to open us, to soften us, then suffering becomes a sacred process. It becomes the fire through which the ego is burned away and the soul is revealed. This is why many people say that their greatest spiritual growth came not in times of peace, but in times of hardship, because those moments demand that we let go of false securities and fall into something greater than ourselves. They demand surrender, not in the sense of giving up, but in the sense of giving over, of yielding to a deeper wisdom that we do not control but can trust. God does not waste pain. Every crack, every tear, every moment of despair is an opportunity for deeper healing. But we must be willing to sit with it, to stop asking, how do I get out of this? And start asking, what is this showing me? That is the turning point. That is when suffering shifts from being something we endure to something that transforms us. In this light, suffering is not something to fear. It is a sacred invitation. And if we dare to accept it, if we stay present and open through it, we may come to see that the very thing we thought would break us was, in fact, the hand of God, dealing not with who we pretend to be, but with who we truly are. From the moment we are born, we begin to form a sense of self, a mental image built from names, roles, experiences, and labels. This construct becomes what we commonly refer to as ime, the personal identity. We say, I am this, or I am that, and over time, these definitions harden. We believe we are our achievements, our failures, our opinions, our possessions, and even our pain. But this collection of thoughts, memories, and labels is not who we truly are. It is a mask, what some might call the ego, and it is with this mask that we move through the world. However, when we speak of divine dealing, of God working in and through us, it must be understood that such dealing does not happen at the surface level of the ego. God deals with something far deeper. The ego lives in a world of separation. It thrives on comparison, judgment, resistance, and control. It constantly seeks to assert itself, to prove its worth, defend its identity, and maintain a sense of superiority or inferiority. Yet all of this is built on illusion. It is a house of mirrors, fragile and temporary. And because the ego cannot sustain true peace, we are often left feeling unfulfilled even when life seems to go our way. Something deeper in us knows that this version of self is not the full truth. This is where surrender comes in, not as a weakness or defeat, but as a courageous act of letting go. To meet it. It is the willingness to release our grip on who we think we are, so that we may come to know who we truly are beneath the noise. God does not require performance. He is not interested in the character you play. Divine dealing happens when we are willing to lay down the mask and stand spiritually naked. vulnerable, honest, and present. This process can be unsettling. The ego does not go quietly. It will resist. It will argue. It will find ways to justify its presence and protect its territory. It may even try to use spirituality as another identity. A more refined ego, but ego nonetheless. But real spiritual growth begins when we no longer seek to strengthen the ego, but to transcend it. Not by destroying it, but by seeing through it. What remains when the ego's voice is no longer in charge? Silence, presence, stillness, a sense of spaciousness that does not need to be named. In that space, we come into contact with something timeless, a consciousness that is not personal but universal. That is where God deals with us. Not as separate beings, but as expressions of a greater whole. When we let go of the need to control life, something beautiful begins to unfold. We move with greater ease, we listen more deeply, we act not from fear or ambition, but from wisdom and alignment. This is not passive, it is powerful. Because when the ego steps aside, the true self can emerge. The self that is rooted in love, in peace, in unity. This is the invitation, to stop trying to fix the false self and to instead surrender to what is already whole within you. God is not trying to improve your mask. He is inviting you to remove it. He is not dealing with your resume, your image, or your reputation. He is dealing with your essence, that which cannot be defined, but can always be known in stillness. And so the spiritual journey becomes simpler, though not always easy. It is the ongoing practice of surrender, letting go of what you are not so that what you truly are can rise. It is not a path of adding, but of subtracting, not of becoming, but of remembering. And in that remembrance, we return to the place where divine dealing becomes not just possible, but inevitable. In a world dominated by noise, not just external, but internal, we often overlook the power and significance of silence. Every day, we are bombarded by information, opinions, conversations, and thoughts. The mind rarely pauses. It jumps from one concern to the next, rehearsing the past or rehearsing the future. And in this constant stream of mental activity, it becomes difficult to hear the subtle voice of the divine. But if one learns to listen in a different way, not with the ears, but with presence, one begins to realize that God does not always speak in words. More often than not, God communicates through stillness. This stillness is not the absence of sound, but the presence of awareness. It is not passive or empty. In fact, it is alive with depth, with clarity, and with wisdom. It is a space within us that remains untouched by external circumstances. A space that we carry whether we are in a quiet room or a crowded city. When we become still, when we enter this inner sanctuary, we begin to perceive life differently. We feel guided, not by sudden revelation, but by a deep inner knowing, a quiet sense of alignment. This is the space where God deals with us most clearly. The problem is not that God is silent. The problem is that we are rarely still enough to listen. Divine communication does not often come in dramatic revelations or loud instructions. Instead, it comes in the form of peace, a nudge, a deep sense of this is right, or a sudden clarity that wasn't there before. These are not accidents. They are signs that we have touched a deeper part of ourselves, a part where the divine resides and moves. Many people search for signs from above, waiting for some external confirmation of divine presence. But what if the sign is already within you, waiting to be noticed beneath the mental clutter? What if God has been speaking all along, not in the language of thought, but in the language of awareness? In truth, the most profound messages we receive are not always understood with the intellect. They are felt, known in the body, in the heart, in the soul. This kind of knowing arises only when the mind is quiet enough to receive it. Stillness is not something we achieve by effort. It is not a goal we reach by trying harder. In fact, the more we strive, the more elusive it becomes. Stillness comes when we allow, when we stop resisting, stop trying to control, and simply become present with what is. It arises when we are fully here, not lost in past or future, not grasping or pushing, but just being. And in that state of being, we open ourselves to the sacred. God deals with us in stillness because stillness is the natural state of the soul. It is where clarity replaces confusion, where love replaces fear, where truth replaces illusion. It is not something added to us, it is uncovered, always there, always waiting beneath the surface. When we practice stillness, we are not becoming something new. We are returning to what we have always been. This is why moments of silence are not empty, they are full of presence, full of potential, full of God. To sit in silence, to walk mindfully, to breathe with awareness, these are not just spiritual exercises. They are sacred acts of listening. They are how we attune ourselves to a frequency that never stopped transmitting. Only we had forgotten how to receive. So when we say a God is dealing, let us understand that this dealing does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a quiet morning, a deep breath, a sudden peace in the midst of chaos. These are not small things, they are everything. They are the whisper of the eternal in the language of now. And it is in this stillness that we finally hear what has always been spoken, not with sound, but with truth, certainly. Here is the conclusion of the entire speech. A God is dealing, bringing together all four keynotes in a unified, reflective and educational tone. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the still point where all that has been said returns to its source. We have spoken of the present moment, not as a fleeting second, but as sacred ground. It is here, and only here, that divine dealing takes place. God is not in the pages of yesterday or the projections of tomorrow. God is in the breath you are taking now, the awareness that is awake in this very moment. We have looked at suffering not as punishment but as process, a refining fire through which the false falls away and the essential is revealed. In the very heart of our struggles, God is not absent. He is near, inviting, shaping, transforming. What we fear might be breaking us is often the very tool being used to awaken us. We have explored surrender, not as a loss of control, but as a return to truth. When we release the masks we wear, the identities we cling to, we begin to sense something deeper, self that is not defined by form or fear. It is there that divine dealing begins to reach us, not in the image we present to the world, but in the essence of who we truly are. And finally, we have entered the quiet, the stillness, the silence where the deepest truths are spoken without words. In that sacred silence, we discover that God does not always shout, but always speaks. And if we are willing to become still, we will hear the quiet language of love, of peace, of presence. So let us not wait for thunder to believe the divine is near. Let us not demand signs from the sky when the signs are already within. Let us return to the now. Let us trust the pain. Let us surrender the ego. Let us honor the stillness. For in all of this, one truth remains. God is dealing. Thank you.